it's working.
I just got loads of phone notifications about us going live, so that's good.
Yeah, I can see you on YouTube now, Gisela.
Okay, just my full picture, right? Yeah. I'm gonna share the screen again. Okay.
Yes, and I can see the name of everyone who's talking.
I see. And if I'm talking, then you can see my video.
Yes, it's shown in the corner.
On the top right corner. Okay, so I think I will do the welcome with the video and then switch it off so that the full slides can be shown.
Nice.
Right, so welcome everybody. Welcome to the NF Core Hackathon. It is a great pleasure to have you all on board this week for our first ever fully online hackathon. And during this week, there will actually be 2 parallel events taking place, the Nextflow tutorial and the NF Core Hackathon. And if it hadn't been for the pandemic situation, these events would have taken place in Heidelberg and had been co-organized by the German Cancer Research Center in Heidelberg and the Quantitative Biology Center in Tübingen. And that's why they kindly sponsored the Nextflow tutorial that is going on also this week. However, we are glad that this event could still take place online, and we are very excited to see that it attracted even more participants than ever. So let's have a look at what awaits us this week. The Nextflow tutorial already started this morning, and it will take place from 9:30 to 11:30 during the rest of this week. The NF Core Hackathon will start after these talks, and will continue nonstop until Friday. Of course, it's scheduled from 9 to 5 p.m. in the Central European summertime, as most organizers are in this time zone, but you can contribute at any time depending on your time zone and availability. Every day at 1 p.m. there will also be some interesting talks on relevant NF Core and bioinformatics topics. Today, we start with an introduction to NF Core and a tutorial on how to run NF Core pipelines. On Tuesday, we will have a glimpse of the latest developments on Nextflow DSL2 and modules and how they will be incorporated into NF Core. On Wednesday, we'll have a talk by Ellen Kronander, an invited speaker, on data management solutions for bioinformatic projects. And on Thursday, we'll have a talk about the latest updates in NF Core tools and guidelines. And finally, on Friday, we'll present you 3 featured NF Core pipelines in detail: the RNA-seq pipeline, viral recon, and SAREC for variant calling. And we'll talk about what do these pipelines comprise and how can you use them for your research. After the talks, we'll do a daily wrap-up to present what has been going on during each day of the hackathon and to make sure we are all up to date into the latest hackathon developments. So how can you join the hackathon talks? You can join them via Zoom. And this has the advantage that you can then participate into the live Q&A session. And all the hackathon talks will also be live streamed on YouTube and be available later on demand. To find the links to join us on Zoom or on YouTube, you can just go to the NF Core website, to the events page, and in the Hackathon July 2020 event, you will find all the information that you need to join all the sessions. On Thursday, additionally, we'll have a virtual social event, which will comprise an online pub quiz via Kahoot, and for the interested ones, a virtual escape room afterwards. So join us on Zoom for this social event, and you can test your NF Core and Nextflow knowledge in the pub quiz. And in this event, we will also be able to get to know each other a bit better. And talking about this, who will actually be at the hackathon? So for the first time, this hackathon is fully online. And currently there are more than 100 people registered. And we are very glad that making this event fully virtual has attracted people from all over the world, from Côte d'Ivoire to New Zealand, from US to South Africa, and in many different countries in Europe. When it comes to the Nextflow level of all the participants, we have participants from all the different levels. So from never tried running Nextflow before to written several pipelines. So don't be afraid of asking questions and participating, even if you're a beginner. If you're stuck somewhere, just ask some questions and surely someone can help you answer those. When it comes to the experience of writing NF Core pipelines, we are also glad to see that there are about half the participants are new to the NF Core community. So this is a great opportunity to get started. And especially for the NF Core newbies, you can stay for the talks today where Phil Ills will talk about what is NF Core and how to join us. And Friederike Hansen will hold a tutorial on how to run NF Core pipelines. But so what will we be working on during the hackathon? We've asked you already in the registration form which topics you would be interested about, and checking your answers, we've come up with 4 hackathon projects. A project to work on new pipelines, a project to work on existing pipelines, on improving them, a project to work on the DSL2 template and DSL2 modules for NF Core, and finally, a project to work on improving the current NF Core tools, which are written in Python. So originally there was also a 5th project, the AWS Megatest, but this will be merged with the NF Core tools to have a balanced amount of people per project. So how can you participate in this hackathon project? For each of the projects, there's a Slack channel in our NF Core Slack. So you can just join us on Slack and add yourself to this channel. There will be also a Jitsi room where you can video call with all the other hackathonians that are participated in your same project. And we will also track the progress via HackMD slides. You can add the progress that you have been done into your slides, and then we will present them during the daily wrap-ups. And finally, we also have a Hackathon project board on GitHub. So just have a look there, and there are some issues and pull requests collected, which can give you an idea on what to work on during this week. And if you try and add also the PRs and issues that you're currently working on there, it helps us track the progress of the hackathon. So that would be all from my side. We will follow up now with the talks of Phil and Frederica, but if you have any questions, please write them now in the chat and I'll try to answer them. All right, so there doesn't seem to be any question. So I'll give the stage to Philip Ewells and he will introduce you to NF Core.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining and thanks for the great introduction, Sarah. It's really exciting to have so many people join the hackathon this year. It gets bigger and bigger every time we hold it. And I think this is certainly the future of events like this, is to have them online and get people from all over the world to join. It's really exciting to see. Right, let's see if I can share my screen now. So I'm just going to, I've got a kind of a fairly short stack of slides today. I'm going to be talking a few times this week, but I'll start off the week just with a quick introduction to NF Core. As Gisela said, there's quite a lot of people amongst you who are fairly new to Nextflow and to NF Core. So if you've been around for a while, then you can go and make yourself a cup of tea or something. If not, just treat this as a refresher for what NF Core is and how we all work together and how this thing is organized. So my name is Phil Ewells. I work in Sweden at the Science for Life laboratory, SciLife Lab, and I work at a platform at SciLife Lab, which is the Swedish national genomics infrastructure. So we work with very large amounts of genomic sequencing data from research groups all over Sweden. And this kind of drew us to start building these pipelines with Nextflow several years ago. And so at a Nextflow hackathon, a Nextflow meeting back in 2017, I think, started talking to a few others in the Nextflow community about how we could standardize our various Nextflow pipelines and kind of start to work together. Namely Alex Peltzer, who was at the time at Cubic, and also with some group in Singapore, and a few others. And so because of that, NF Core was born. And the idea was really to try and stop everyone from having to rewrite the same versions of the same pipelines and to come together on a set of kind of best practices. So with that, NF Core this is a tagline on the homepage, which gets kind of trotted out every time I give a talk. It's a community effort to collect a curated set of analysis pipelines built using Nextflow. This, of course, only makes sense if you know what Nextflow is. Hopefully some of you will have been in the Nextflow training this morning, or at least following along with it, or be kind of familiar with it. But it's a workflow manager which allows you to chain together different steps in an analysis pipeline. Importantly, it works with virtually any underlying compute infrastructure. So it has built-in support for cloud, as we saw, as well as traditional HPC. So we use it with the Slurm job scheduler, for example, and all kinds. So It works virtually everywhere, and it also has built-in support for software packaging. So Conda, Docker, and Singularity are the three which we work with the most in the NF Core community. This means that you don't have to install any software which is specific to a given Nextflow pipeline or NF Core pipeline. Each NF Core pipeline comes with all of the software it needs. So all you need to have is Nextflow and then one of these three. That means that the reproducibility and the portability of every NF Core pipeline is superbly high. And if you've been around in bioinformatics for a while, it starts to solve an age-old problem of when you want to run something new, it takes you a day to just get all the different dependencies and everything. That's a thing of the past now. Okay, so that's Nextflow. NF Core, what is an NF Core? At the heart of NF Core really is just a set of guidelines. It's a community who comes together around these guidelines and we kind of agree, this is the way things should be done. These are the best practices that we're going to adhere to. And that's it. Guidelines and kind of adhering to them is kind of tough to manually regulate. So we started building a set of tools to kind of automatically check these things and also to help you work with these things, kind of helper tools. So these are nothing to do with the running a pipeline itself per se. They're all fairly generic. And these are written in Python because that's what we're most familiar with. But they help you as a developer and also as a user, as we'll see later. Finally, of course, what most of us come to NF Core for is there's a set of pipelines that we kind of provide and build as a community. And if you're a user, then that's kind of the main thing you come for. You don't really need to worry too much about the guidelines and the tools and everything. If you go to the NF Core website, you'll find this big list of all the different NF Core pipelines along with descriptions of what they do and what they work on. I updated this slide a few days ago, so I hope it's still valid, that we have currently have 25 pipelines with a release, which means that they're effectively stable. 14 pipelines under development, so no active release yet, but doesn't mean they're not usable. And then 3 older pipelines which have now been archived. And this is kind of a typical, any NF Core pipeline can be any one of these 3. Unlike some other bioinformatics kind of listing services, NF Core is not somewhere where you can build your pipeline, come along and kind of add it to a database so other people can find it. That's not the idea. We don't want to just collect as many pipelines as possible, kind of the opposite actually. We want to have just a curated single minimal set of pipelines. So we want to have one pipeline per data type. So we want to have one RNA-seq pipeline, not 20 that you have to choose from. That one pipeline can have lots of different options and be run in different ways and be configurable, that's great. But we want it to be a single set of pipelines so that it's very clear as to which one we promote for each type of data or which question we want to ask of the data. All of the pipelines that were listed there should be very, very reproducible. I've hopefully hit that point, as well as the software, which is wrapped so very reproducible, as well as the way that Nextflow can be moved around and everything. Every pipeline also comes with a digital object identifier, a DOI, which is specific for the pipeline, and then there's a specific DOI for every single release of that pipeline. So that means if you use a pipeline, you can cite that DOI in any publications, and anyone can go and find the code from that pipeline from that specific release. And if they run that, the software container is tied to the release. So if you rerun your analysis, it'll be running with exactly the same versions of the software with exactly the same versions of the code. And if you specify the same version of Nextflow, then it should be basically completely reproducible in theory. Everything we do with NF Core is held under open source licenses with MIT. So your rec is kind of strongly encouraged for you to take these chunks of code and use them for whatever other projects you want. You go off and build off of NF Core, that's completely fine. With the NF Core tools, the helper tools, we try to make them flexible enough that they'll work with any Nextflow pipeline. This doesn't have to be specifically NF Core. So of course, that's our primary target. And finally, all of those pipelines, because they are all past those automated tests, because they're all being checked by the NF Core community, we can say that they all adhere to best practices for bioinformatics and open computing. Very happy to say that the NF Core project was published quite recently in Nature Biotechnology. It came out eventually in February. This was a big body of work worked on by much of the core team, and it took a long time to get through for various different stages of preprint and then review. The whole paper was completely rewritten several times. So if you have read the preprint, it's worth going back and rereading the final published version, because it's a very different beast. And it's quite easy to read. The paper itself is just a short letter, so it's not very long at all. And we kind of go through the basics of how NF Core is set up in these 3 pillars of kind of deploying pipelines, of this community participation, and then kind of different features we have for developers. If you look in the supplementary materials, that's much longer than the paper, and that's sort of a paper in itself, really. And that goes into many more details and specifics of how we run the NF Core community, the automation that we set up, how we keep everything synchronized and working, and actually how this thing works at scale. There's some nice graphs in the back, which of course I like because I made them, showing the size of the community and how we've grown over time, and how quickly we respond. Now, when we made these, we of course knew that they'd be out of date the moment we sat them into a file. And so we did it in such a way that all of these are actually live on the NF Core website. So if you're into that kind of thing, you can go and check out this URL, and you'll see the live data of exactly how many Twitter users we have, followers we have right now, etc. So this is really fun. And you can see on these graphs that the NF Core community is really still growing fast. We haven't plateaued. And every single day, we're getting more and more people using pipelines, and more people involved in contributing to those pipelines. To give you a feel for what that looks like, back in 2017, we were just three people, 3 institutes, 3 people on GitHub, and that's when I created the NF Core GitHub organization. Within a year, things had already started to take off a lot faster than I expected. Paolo, the main developer of Nextflow, had already kind of retweeted a couple of tweets and started to get a bit of a following, a bit of an interest. And by 2019, it was clear that this project was really starting to take off and had a place in the bioinformatics community. Now in 2020, we're starting to have in the high hundreds to even thousands of people involved. The Slack community is massive, with lots of people coming to Slack to ask for help, and also to kind of discuss how to contribute. Lots of people making issues and committing code on GitHub, and a lot of people following what we're doing on NF Core. The top one, the institutes, that's the contributors page on the NF Core website, which shows a list of all the different institutes across the world where people are using NF Core. So if you haven't already, it's very much appreciated if you can go and add yourself to that page. It's just a quick pull request to a YAML file with your institute name and logo. And it really helps to kind of show that we're global, and that people are using these pipelines. And then if people go to that site and they find the associated name in an institute they recognize, they know who they can go to for help or advice. So these are those contributing institutions. It'd be great if we can get a few more in some of those blank places in the map, for example. And it's brilliant to see what started off as quite a European-centric project, and still does have a European focus, but you can see we're starting to make inroads all over the world. If we look at who's visiting the website, that's a bit more of a spread picture, but it still sort of roughly conforms to a similar kind of spread. And when you look at these stats, I mean, it's just, I think it's fantastic of how many different people we have and how many repositories, and just what a huge body of work this represents. Right, I'm gonna stop there and pass on to Federico, who's going to talk about how to actually use these pipelines and how to run them if you're new to Nextflow and new to NF Core. There's 4 main places that I'd recommend everyone to get involved with if you're interested in NF Core. All the work, all the code is done through Git and GitHub. So we have the NF Core organization. If you just drop us a line, either on the instructions on the website there, on nfcore/join, then we'll send you an invite, and then you have access to work with all of those repositories right away. The main place we communicate is Slack. So it's an NF Core Slack. Again, if you go to that URL, you can get yourself an invite with just a click of a button. And we organize all of our discussion in the different channels of the NF Core Slack organization. We broadcast what we're doing over Twitter. So if you're a Twitter user, hop on there. And then increasingly, we're starting to use YouTube to put things up there. So for example, this talk is being live streamed to YouTube, and it will stay there so that people who aren't able to join us live today will be able to watch this at a later date. We're also hoping to put up more kind of tutorial material there and other help material. So go to the website, check out that URL, and make sure that you're you're involved in all those 4 different channels. And with that, I'll leave you for now, and I'll pass you on to the next speaker. Thank you for your attention.
All right, let me share my screen with you. All right.
So I should have said, if anyone has any questions while you're setting up, then shout, and I'll do my best to answer.
Yeah, I'll wait a couple minutes then. Okay, maybe I'll just get started. Yeah, so my name is Rike, and I'm a PhD student at Cubic, and I got exposed to NF Core last year-ish. So I'm excited that I now get to give a talk here. So for the past 9 months or so, I've been running Sarek a lot. So I'm more involved in running the pipelines than developing them. And so hopefully today I can share some pointers to answer the how questions on how to run them. And either by my own experience or by things that I've learned from other people in the hackathons, but that we don't usually do here. So yeah, I will turn off my video now and then get started. If I can. Huh. All right, I know that doesn't let me turn off my video, so it's just gonna leave it up now. Okay, first things first, I guess Phil has already shared this, but you don't really have to worry about installing any software that you need in the pipeline processes itself, but what you do need is to install Nextflow and then one-off Singularity, Docker or Conda. And with that, you are set to go. And if you've joined the Nextflow tutorials this morning, then you've already learned how to install Nextflow, I guess. All right, then the next question I would ask myself is, how do I get to the pipelines? How can I fetch them? And the good news is you don't need to clone a repository or download them at all. Nextflow is gonna do all of this for you. There are 2 commands, Nextflow pull and Nextflow run. And they will recognize the GitHub repository name, so NF Core and / the pipeline name, for example, Sarek or RNA-seq, and then clone it in to your home directory .nextflow. And you can specify which release or which branch you want by using -r and then, I don't know, 1.3 or so. So to be exactly sure that which release version you used, which is good for reproducing your results later on. And usually we do Nextflow pull first, just to be extra sure that there's no clashing and you don't accidentally run an older version or a different version of the pipeline that you didn't intend to run. All right, in case you don't have your cluster or so on, doesn't have access to the internet or so, you can also pre-download your pipelines. There's NF Core tools, which helps you do this. So you just can type NF Core download and then your pipeline, and this will download the entire pipeline for you. It will also download all kinds of configs. You can specify, for example, that you want a Singularity container or a Docker container, and then we'll also bundle everything for you into a tar or a zip file and so on. So you can then easily transfer it over to wherever you actually want to run your pipelines. Yeah, next thing is, how can you configure your pipelines to run? And there's a large number of configs. There are 3, the default or base config, core profiles, and institutional profiles, which kind of come with the pipeline. And then you can also have local config files to specify specific parameters. And I will go over all these configs now. So the default base config is stored in a folder called conf in each individual pipeline repository. It is automatically loaded when you run the pipeline, and it has like sensible default resource allocation. So how much memory or how many cores or so on this specific process needs to run. It doesn't specify any software packaging, and it also can't do any job submissions. To tackle that, to get the software packaging, you can then specify core profiles. These are, for example, Singularity, Docker, or Conda. and you can just set them by typing -profile and then this specific software packaging you'd like. And also each pipeline comes with a test profile, which runs with a teeny tiny test data set to check whether your pipeline runs at all on your system. So you can just type -profile test, Singularity, for example, to execute the test run with Singularity. Then next, there come institutional profiles. So if you're lucky, somebody at your institute has already run NF Core pipelines and they written an institutional config that you can find on GitHub in the configs repository, and this specifies the job submission. It can also specify the software packaging if you want everyone using your system, for example, to use Singularity. And they work for all the pipelines, for all the users in your system. So, and you only have a single point to update. So if you once set them up, you can run all the pipelines without having to worry about this anymore. And then there's one more thing, you can also have institutional pipeline specific profiles. So some pipelines need special settings, but everyone who uses these pipelines on your system will need to set these specific parameters for the pipeline. So you can also specify those to not having to worry about this every time you want to run Zarek or something. All right. Then there are local config files. So sometimes you may want to run a pipeline, and for whichever reason your data is so big that it doesn't work with the pre-allocated or predetermined resources. So in this case, you can also have a local config where you can specify your resource requirements for your specific project, and you can add it to your run by specifying -c and then your config. And the lowercase is important. There's also an uppercase C, which overrides all the previous configs, and the lowercase adds your config to the existing one. So you still get, for example, the core profiles to use them. And in case you don't have an institutional profile yet, you can here also specify your scheduler and so on. And then after you figured out all the right settings, be sure to add it to the NF Core config so you can reuse it anytime you want, and everyone else also can reuse it and doesn't have to go through the same process as well. All right, then there's something like a personal config. So in your home directory, there's a folder called .nextflow, in which is a config where you can, for example, set your email address, or for Nextflow Tower, your access token. And this will also be run every time you execute that pipeline. And then you, for example, get an email on success or fail for the pipeline. And then last but not least, there's the parameters file. So you can either specify all your parameters on the command line by typing -input, -output, or some specific parameter for the pipeline, but you can also save them all into one JSON or YAML file. And this is great for rerunning your pipeline later on, because you just have this one file that you can, I don't know, store with your results and so on. And you don't have to go through to try and determine which parameters you used. This is also possible, but more work, in my opinion. And there's also a helper tool from Tools called NF Core Launch. And I guess Phil will also talk a little bit about this on Thursday in his Tools talk. Okay, if you now got too many configs in your mind, don't worry. For most of them, you don't have to worry, or you only have to worry about them once. So the default and core configs, they are already set up and you just need to use them. The institutional and personal config, you may need to set up once and then probably don't have to worry about them, or maybe just update them in case something changes. And then the local config, so the one that contains your project-specific resources, you hopefully won't need to set up, but in case your data is somewhat special, you may need to set it up. And parameters file, of course, you always need to add your input parameters if you use this option. Okay, I already mentioned this briefly, but I just want to reiterate this. So each pipeline comes with a test. So you can use this test to figure out, does your pipeline work? Is it me, or is it the data, or is it the pipeline that doesn't work? And these test data sets are really, really tiny, so you should probably be able to run it on your laptop even. They also work with GitHub Actions, which had very restrictive limitations on resources. Yeah, and you can specify them by using -profile test, and then, for example, use your institutional config or Conda, Docker, Singularity, whichever you prefer. Okay, now how to actually run the pipeline. You've got your configs, you tested whether it runs. So you type nextflow run nfcore your pipeline, you specify the profile just as before, and you can add now either the parameters file or your specific parameters. And then you can, for example, run all of this in a normal terminal session. The problem here is once you close the terminal, the nextflow run or the nfcore run quits, which is not useful for having runs that take days. So instead, you can also submit nextflow with the -bg tag, or you can open a screen session, or some HPC clusters can also allow you to submit it via an interactive session. Just choose something where that you can close and come back to later. Otherwise, your progress may be gone. Each pipeline comes with extensive documentation, which will help you choose your input parameters, and not just the input parameters are documented, but also all the output parameters. And in this case, for example, Sarek, there are also information about specific tools here for ASCAD and Centennion, for example. So definitely take a look at the documentation. It's very useful and very detailed usually. Otherwise, you can also type nextflow run and then --help, and you will get all the parameters printed to take a look. Okay, so I guess now you've started your pipeline. So next question is, what's your pipeline doing while you walked away? Is it running? Did it fail? What happened? And one way to figure this out is you could, for example, log back into your screen session, and there you see that, I don't know, 2 out of 2 processes have completed and 117 out of 133. So you're still waiting for 16 of them. The other option is that you set up email notification on success or fail. This is documented in the nextflow docs. So whenever something happens with your pipeline and it exits, you get an email basically telling you what happened, and it will also display the error message, which is useful. Or you could set up Nextflow Tower, which gives you this nice visualization where you can see what's happening to your pipeline, and you can also see all your previous runs, which can sometimes be useful. Okay, so now your pipeline ran, but it unfortunately failed and something went wrong. What do you do now? So you get an error message either via email or also just in the terminal that gives you a hint. It provides you an error message. Sometimes they are not that useful and you may need to navigate into the work directory. So you get the work directory in which the process failed down here. You can navigate into it, and then there are a bunch of .command files displayed. So definitely make sure you type ls-a or to also show your hidden files. And then you get error messages, for example, and the command log, which can be useful to take a look at to get a first idea about what went wrong. And also there's the .nextflow log, which also contains information that could help you figure out your specific issue. If this didn't help, then maybe take a look at the documentation again, maybe just oversaw something, or definitely always ask for help. There's a Slack channel for each individual pipeline called the pipeline name. If you haven't joined Slack yet, you can go to the NFCore website and /join, where you can send out an invite. Okay, so you now have figured out your issues with your pipeline and you want to run it again, but you've also already computed data for 5 days and you really don't want to recompute all of the stuff that has already been computed. And Nextflow saves you here by having the -resume tag. Just adding this to the run in the same work directory will resume this pipeline, but maybe you don't want to resume the last run you've had, but the second to last run you've had. And in this case, you can type -resume and add the run name or the session ID. And you can get this by using Nextflow log, which will display all the runs you've had in this specific work directory. There's also a blog entry going into a little bit more detail. So if you want to use this, this may be a useful resource to get more detailed information. Okay, and so now your pipeline has had errors, you resumed it, and it has finished. What to do next? So there's this work directory I've been talking about, and this can get quite huge. So you should probably remove it. And don't worry, the results file are all copied over into the results directory you specified, so you won't lose any of your work. But only do this once you're sure you don't want to resume any runs. There's also Nextflow clean. You can get some help on how to use it by typing Nextflow clean -h. Here you can delete the entire work directory, also parts of it, which can sometimes be useful when you use resume a lot. The work directory can explode. And so you might not want to keep all the intermediate files from all the runs you've done, but only from the most recent. Yeah, I've brought a tiny example by running the test profile on Sarek. So I create a clean work directory, open a screen session, and then pull the newest Sarek release and run it with a test profile in CFC, which is our cluster. And this now runs for a while, and this is heavily sped up because I think the Sarek test here takes around 15 minutes or so. And it tests some of the standard processes here in this particular case, creates the multi-QC file now, completed successfully. So the test was successful. And now I have the Nextflow log in there, the results file and the work directory. I can remove the work directory as I don't need it anymore. When I go into the results file, I can see the test results that Sarek generated. So Sarek apparently tests fine on our system. Okay, to summarize, to run a pipeline, create a clean workspace, open a screen session or something else, pull the pipeline you want to run, then run the pipeline with the right version, your institutional profile or any of the others, your local configs, your parameter files, and once you've done, remove the work directory, look at the results, and be excited about that it finished. Yeah, some sources or resources. So these slides are mostly based on the usage tutorial from the website. Take a look for more detailed information also on some other aspects, and then also on the tips and tricks talk that Phil gave in the last hackathon, which also has some more advanced information or tips and tricks in it. Yeah, thank you for your attention. Yeah, are there any questions? I couldn't see the chat during the talk. Okay, well, also otherwise feel free to approach me or anyone else anytime if you have questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Rika, for the talk. And yeah, let's just all get started. Meet you in Slack. Yeah, let's just all get started. Let's meet you in Slack and in Jitsi, and choose a hackathon project that you would like to work on, and we'll meet you there. So, bye.
Bye, Gisela.